All right, we're live.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome again to the return of Taste and Chili's story time hour. I'm very happy. I had a pleasure reading your stories this week. So thank you for putting those out. And generally, when I put together the prompts, I had this, more than anything, I had a feeling in my mind, the feeling of kind of reminiscing together, say, on the back porch in the summer, or while sharing a drink at a bar with a close friend or something of that nature. Chili has just picked up a very lovely cat. You can't see it, of course, because
you'll be able to see it. This is going to be video.
Oh, you'll be able to see it.
Yeah. So Butterscotch is joining us. So.
Oh, I'm not made up for camera, but
that's okay.
Chili, ever the entertainer. He captures both the eye and the ear, so he'll pull it off. Maybe I'll make an appearance later on when I've run out of stamina in reviewing these stories. And anyway, it was sort of dwelling on that feeling, which I don't think that I put into the prompt at first. So I tried to fix that later. So when analyzing these, I'm kind of looking both to the quality of the writing and the interest in the story, but also to how much it captures that feeling. So that's how I'm going to be assessing it.
Yeah,
so
I think.
What were you looking for?
Well, generally, I could give a fuck about the prompt, and that's even when I'm the head judge, I tend not to get too attached. If the story is good, it's good. I cared more about it this week, I think, than most, because it really did feel like, hey, I want this to fit the form. And when stories sort of slip back into that sort of omniscient, distant kind of thing, I definitely by default lost a fair amount of interest. I felt like a straight telling of a story happened once or twice, and I was excited to see that. But I think the ones that really sort of won me over were the ones that got creative with the form and didn't seem to ignore it. So all in all, I was pretty okay with this week. Nothing like really pissed me off, which is great. I think at worst I was sort of neutral on some things, but some stories did actually evoke a feeling, and that was really cool. And some were pretty solid. So
I don't know if I was having a particularly emotional evening while reading them or not, but a lot of these resonated with me in a positive way. And I didn't dislike any of the stories. Some of them I liked more than others, but I think that's just the nature of reading them. So I hope nobody goes in thinking that I hated their story just because it didn't win. But to that end, let's see, what's first up on the docket? Would you mind diving in for us?
Oh, sure. So the first one for this week or shall I say think back, was Flirp, with a title that is quite long. So it is On the Anniversary of When Time Ended, or wow, that felt just like yesterday. Okay, so this is a temporally oriented fuckery thing where we have someone communicating with okay, so was it themselves like communicating with like an ancestor but in younger form, I think?
Yes, I believe that.
Yeah,
this was our narrator, our protagonist, conversing with their grandfather. However, the grandfather is now younger than our protagonist, who I read as a he, but that might just be me being he.
Yeah.
So apologies if that's not the case.
No, I think that's how I read it as well. But then again, I'm also, that person. But yeah, okay, so this is kind of one of those stories where I think the premise and the structure kind of got a little too busy for its own good, or at least for my reading. I liked the sound of it. I liked how it read. It did flow. I was pretty confused, and maybe that was intentional. But I didn't quite grasp a whole lot of what was going on, and I guess I missed out on some sort of what felt like emotional catharsis that was there, but I didn't see it. So I didn't hate this, but I did feel a little lost in reading it. Again, maybe that was intentional. I don't know. Neither does my cat.
I think I may have liked this a little more than you did. I do like the inversion on the theme. Generally speaking, when one recalls or when one thinks back, as the week's title, it isn't on the other character's future. presumably, or, temporally what would have been placed, as what we perceive as the future, depending on how you want to interpret time here. In that sense, I sort of wonder, in time being broken, I first interpreted it as sort of everything happens at the same time, which clearly isn't necessarily the way it plays out in the story. So my first perception of this conversation was that it was written in the sense that, everything exists at the same time. And that didn't make a lot of sense to me then. But once it kind of unraveled in reverse, it made sense to me in retrospect, which also added a cool aspect to reading the story and kind of mirroring the theme, which presumably was unintentional unless you expected me to misunderstand your story. So very well done if so. But in any case, I quite enjoyed it. I like that the future and the past recollections, as far as they're centered around the grandfather. They both sort of have a similar quality to me, which I like that consistency. And then the turn, to focusing on the importance on the grandfather, I really liked. It was sad, it was relatable, but I did think it could be trimmed a bit. I thought that at a certain point, there are certain things that didn't really add much to me, and I couldn't pick those out by memory. But just one more run through, I think, would have strengthened the piece overall. But overall, I did like it.
And yeah, to be clear, I enjoyed the reading of it, even if I felt, again, a bit lost, but I didn't really have a take major exception to the piece. I had like the least to say about this in my little judge burps, and that's partially because I felt lost, but I did really, and this is me, and I'm kind of a sucker for Flirp's style and way of writing. So I liked it. I liked how it read. Felt very naturalistic and cool. So that worked for me.
Okay, so after this one, we progress on to next. I'm sorry, I've got to switch tabs here. Unless you want to lead in again.
Oh, I'm happy to. I'll take this one if you want the next two.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So the next up we had Captain Indigo, and Captain Indigo's story was titled Cracked. And this was a pretty upsetting and visceral read. Starts off with a sort of nice little reminiscence over childhood and a fairly typical, like, oh, when I was young kind of view on things. And then sort of progresses into a gory affair, a sad affair, a sort of Dorian Gray-esque affair of just like a person kind of disintegrating and falling apart, trying to sew themselves back together in a bunch of mysterious ways. I liked the telling aspect of this early. Started to struggle with it as it just sort of became, I guess, a bit of an adventure into like just different surgeries and how these surgeries happened. And I was like, okay, at this point, like I get it, but I'm kind of losing some semblance of interest. But that's the negative. But the positive is that this story definitely made my spine tingle. It did get under my skin, did definitely impact and affect me. And I felt upset by the end of it, which I think was the intention. So it was a powerful piece. At least to my eye, and that's kind of how it sat with me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought it was very effective. I liked sort of the "but nothing lasts" as the bell tolling. To me, it kept hitting harder and harder every time. I thought that worked very well. Didn't care for the accent in the German doctor's dialogue. It pulled me out just a little bit.
Yeah.
It's very seldom that I do like that sort of thing. That's a matter of taste, certainly, but it pulled me out a little bit. And then I think there was a little bit of inconsistency in the word choice, where I thought that I had the idea of who the character was, and then they pulled out something that I didn't picture them saying. Now, again, that's in the reader, not in the writer, but again, that pulled me out a little bit. And then I think the ending seemed a bit rushed relative to the composure and pacing throughout, which I thought was one of the strengths of the piece up until that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought that the end, it didn't fail by any means. I mean, it tied it up and it worked, but I think it was not nearly as strong as the rest of it.
I agree, and I think it was like it felt like an extra little thing that we didn't need. Like it was already sad and a bit mournful with the person's just sort of surrendering, their internal worth for all this external stuff. And like, I don't know if we needed that little baby twist thing. I mean, it was fine. I just maybe felt a little extra.
like I said, it works with, you know, the reveal that this is not the first time, et cetera. This is not who she's speaking to. Originally, I thought it was gonna be like a Rosemary's Baby type thing. And I like this better than that. But it was not delivered with the delicacy that the rest of the story showed. And I think that it probably would have been stronger either reworked or cut.
Yeah, and there's I don't know if you picked up on it or not picked up, if you pieced it together better than I did. Like there was some illusion in the middle about somehow making these husbands disappear. I was interested in what they were doing. Like, I don't know what they were doing. Clearly they were doing something, murders, like some kind of fly out by night. I don't know what they were doing, but I wanted to see more of that. And that would have been a different thing to see, as opposed to just sort of a descent, you know, or an ascent up Surgery Mountain. So
yeah, I didn't catch it until I think it was the Argentinian husband that noticed what was attempted to.
Yeah, and like, okay, well, what was it?
Okay,
right.
So that was done well. I like that. It did leave me wondering in that regard, though.
But you know, that's not terrible, having like a little point of intrigue in the story. I wanted to see more of it, but you know, wanting to see more of a story is not really a criticism. It's a compliment. So yeah. You want to take the next ones or anything else to say?
I don't know that I have anything more to say on that one. I think overall it was good. What's after Cracked? We have His Special Day, The Man Called M, which is a great username, by the way. I quite like that. It also makes me think of the Wes Henderson film, the hotel. The name escapes me.
Grand Budapest.
There was Monsieur. Everyone is Monsieur or something. So His Special Day. Now, this one is a sort of a recollection or telling of the relationship of two brothers, and then one of the brothers getting married, and sort of the reflection on it by the other brother of the brother getting married. 3 J's here, which, you know, adds some simplicity, but also I had to make sure that I got the Joes and the Jims straight at certain points. I really liked early on, in terms of brothers, Joe was all Jim had. The same could be said for Joe. I like that. That's a funny line to me. I enjoy that. But I think that overall, it sort of lacks direction to me. That's not to say that it's bad, because I think it captures very well the sort of spirit that I was alluding to in the introduction here. That's what I was looking for. But I could have stood to see characters fleshed out a little bit more, even if it was kind of indirect. I feel like I came away from this thinking, okay, this is something pleasant that all 3 of these J's are going to remember for the rest of their life, and something that's very important to them. But for me, there's not a whole lot memorable there. I think also that the piece probably could have used a bit of a polish. I think that another read through would have strengthened it a little bit. That is to say, it's certainly fine. It accomplishes what I was looking for, but it just didn't do a lot for me beyond that.
I'm inclined to agree. The first thing I had as a note is that there definitely needs to be a tune-up just on the prose. There's a lot of cliches that are repeated over and over. Like the words "after all," once is enough. I believe 3 or 4 times. Like, you know, a phrase is started that way. Phrases are started with like eventuallys, just like, you know, some trite word choices. I was not charmed by the fact that, like, in this short bit of writing, we had 3 characters whose names started with a J, so that made it abundantly more confusing than it needed to be. Yeah. The other, I mean, it's interesting. It felt like, okay, this is intentional. It's like everything right up to the best man speech, when what you kind of asked for was the best man speech. It felt kind of like a cute attempt as opposed to just like a miss, but it rambles and it doesn't really connect. I didn't feel any kind of good feeling, like there was any kind of solid recollection. I didn't really, as you said, have a sense of who these characters were. The choice itself felt odd and didn't seem to accomplish all that much. So I wasn't a huge fan. And yeah, it really, like, a proofing pass. This is a story that really would have benefited from just like being read out loud, so you can actually hear you're saying some similar things over and over again. The flip side to that is that lack of polish does kind of give it that sense of like an oral telling of the story. because people don't talk as cleanly as they write. So this does kind of sound like a person sort of pontificating in a way. So there is that too.
I agree with you. And I think if it was framed that way, it would have been more effective. I think this just needed a little bit more elbow grease.
Yep, a little more care. And
That
there
is to
were
say-
plenty of words to play with to make that happen. You barely didn't even use half of what was available. So just put some more of your ass into it.
Yeah, I think that this is a good foundation. There's certainly a lot under the surface, but you didn't do a whole lot to bring it out, I don't feel.
Cool.
What's next now? Couples Counseling by Chernobyl Princess. Another strong user. So this is a therapy session, which I don't have a ton of experience with in that capacity. However, our other judge has a bit more. So he can provide a little bit more perspective on that. But first and foremost, shouts out to the Finger Lakes as an upstate New York, well, really Western New York native myself. And it's a lovely area. I thought this piece was quite well written. I really came to be quite disappointed as it played out into the failure of the relationship, that progression. But again, I do sort of feel like coming up against the edge, I think that the conclusion was a little rushed. Sometimes it is as simple as one person being the asshole against the saint. I mean, that happens, certainly. But it doesn't really seem like our he here, whose name escapes me, gets a whole lot of say here. He just comes across as just the reason everything is bad to me in my reading. And as it is, having a clear one-sided blameworthy party kind of sapped the quality of the problem to me, because it's not a whole lot to think about. This guy is the insensitive one who has changed and has not appreciated his spouse. So for me, it was executed very well, but I really, again, didn't like the conclusion that much. And I think it kind of retroactively weakened the entirety for me.
That is really interesting. Okay, so some background. I am indeed a shrink, and I have done couples counseling. Chernobyl Princess is as well a therapist. So this was not a reach, I'm sure, to write. A couple of funny things, a bit of an aside, and perhaps it's down to my training. I didn't see one person as the bad and one person as the good, and you really can't when you're in that therapeutic position, because then you're just going to align against that one person. But it would certainly make sense that if you're just an audience watching this, one person here is clearly being an asshole, but the way I sort of read it's like, oh, they're just missing all this stuff and we're going to have to help them see this perspective. So I kind of read it as a therapist because that's what I am. Now my critique on this, well, first, let's just get this out. Like the way that the people answer the questions and the prompts and how they basically ignore, especially the husband in this situation, ignores the questions and just sort of answers their own. I mean, like Chernobyl Princess knew exactly what she was doing. That's exactly how people handle therapy sessions, especially intakes. They answer their own questions. They answer their own, their own things they're thinking about. So the session itself was handled perfectly. Like it read exactly as many of my intakes, especially with couples, do. My main gripe, and we're sort of disagreeing with each other here, does indeed come with what doesn't feel like the ending, but just the stopping point. Like it didn't feel like this is where this ends. There's clearly more time in the session. There's clearly more things to be said. And this didn't feel like a resolution point. It just felt like the first 10 minutes of the session. And I kind of did want to see something to the effect of like, well, where's this going to go next? What's going to happen next? Do we want to now bring the two people in together and then proceed from there? Like, but it just kind of stopped. And I was bummed out. But up until that point, I was definitely engaged. I was definitely on board. I was here for it. So yeah, otherwise a pretty solid piece. I did like what I read. I just didn't love how it kind of just stopped instead of ended.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's possible it's my own bias deciding how I feel about these characters beyond not having that sort of therapeutic background. But I think I agree with you that it gripped me almost more than any other this week. I felt myself sort of invested in it effortlessly, whereas with other stories that I did get invested in, I had to more put myself there. This one was, it was such an easy transition into picturing myself in that position. So I think that was captured very well. Overall, I like it, but I do think that it could have been refined further.
Yeah, I mean, look, it makes sense. I would hope that it would be kind of that effortless read for you, because this is what Chernobyl the Princess does, and she should know how to write this, and she did. She did a good job. Like, this is exactly kind of how it plays out. It shouldn't take work to access this, because she really was writing what she knew, and I appreciated that. So really, it was good. Yeah, just again, wanting more is not a bad sign. It's a good sign. So there is that to consider. So next up. Are we on to next? Are you good?
Yeah, I've said what I can say.
Cool. So next up was Yorichi with Lacuna. How would you go?
I thought.
I don't know. I know that there was some great controversy over whether or not you and I would have any idea what togs were. I did, because I'm a considerate person, Yorichi. Go ahead and look it up, because I didn't know, and generally speaking, I will. Do you know what togs are, Taste?
I tried to look it up, and the only thing that came up was a result for a swimwear brand.
Right. So it seems like basically what togs are what you and I would refer to as Speedos.
Okay.
So skimpy swimwear, I think. At least that's what my understanding is. If we got that wrong, we got that wrong, but whatever. I don't really think it's that crucial to the story, to be completely honest. So whatever. I'll just start by saying that this one, more than any this week, devastated the shit out of me. I've dealt with this in my family history. It sucks. And if Yorichi, if you haven't dealt with this, you certainly figured out how to put it in a story form, because this did indeed tear me to pieces, and it was very powerfully done. I thought it was my favorite take on the prompt. And I'm realizing more and more that we may have looked at this prompt differently. It is obviously yours, but my expectation was sort of a more kind of telling quality to the story. And that's what was here in, I thought, the most creative way. So between that and just how powerful the story was, this I'll just come out, was my favorite piece of the week. It landed very heavily for me, and I really liked it. So that's me.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to say about this one, because I think it's self-evidently of high quality. I think it is an interesting take on the prompt, sort of given the incapacity of someone with a faulty memory to like fully participate in that sort of process of telling and listening, and because the telling is interrupted, it's arrested, and sort of breaking that relationship really did a lot, sort of in the way that I was thinking of the relationship in other stories. So it was very jarring, and it was very good, and it was an unpleasant read for all the right reasons for me, but it was very good. It was very high quality, and I don't think it was my favorite, but it was certainly up at the top, I think. But that's just because I'm a sucker for a happier story. So it was very well executed. Well done.
Cool. All right, you're up next with Fran Guy.
Let's see here. That is She Was the Change, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, She Was the Change was a very interesting one. I quite liked kind of breezing through this.
We're doing great.
One was influenced by Crystal Castle's, the song that I picked. I'm pretty sure I put Magic Spells there, but if not, who's to say?
I think so.
It was a very interesting read. It was sort of a delightful view onto something in that sort of historical oral history lens that I really like, and I try to work into some of the stuff that I put together. Someone reflecting back, referencing this supposedly famous painting. I eat that shit up. I like it. It did leave me asking for more here. Whereas I really enjoyed the action, and I could really visualize what was going on. I think this would function better as part of something else than standing alone, if only because the most interesting question to me is why the course from North Africa through Austria through to Britain? Why is the ship named Athena, et cetera? Like what what is the basis here? And if this is something that I should have picked up on and I didn't, well, I'm an idiot and I'm sorry for that. But I think the most interesting parts of this were the questions that I asked myself after getting myself amped up for it. So while it was very well done, I can't help but thinking that I walk away from this with more questions than reflections. What do you think about it?
I felt very differently, but not very strongly in a different direction. Like, okay, so my biggest question is actually about the very first sentence. I don't know. I don't want to know about the fleet. I don't give a shit. I don't know anything. So clearly, someone in this universe where the story is being told, you want to know about that fleet, don't you? Well, who's being talked to here? Like, I was more interested in like what is the venue that this story is occurring in? Who
Right.
is it being recounted to? I didn't feel like I had an avenue or a window into this. And if you want to go ahead and attack your own intelligence, I'm going to attack mine. I mean, like, this is the type of story that makes my eyes glaze over. It just feels like things are happening. I had a really hard time accessing any of it. And that is indeed because I'm not a very bright person, but I'm not inherently interested in this stuff. So I feel like if you're not, it's a really hard story to access. And again, it comes back to that first sentence of, you want to know about the fleet, don't you? Well, what if I don't? Like, I don't want to know about the fleet. I don't know what this is. So you have to win me over first. And the opening paragraph really didn't. It didn't make me feel like I want to know more. So I'm glad that it worked for you. Really, like, I want all of these stories to work for everyone. It wasn't a story that particularly worked for me. Having said that, the prose does indeed stand up. It felt kind of like a pontification that you might just sort of hear someone boldly kind of talking about it at a bar, and like you just sort of get into the energy of it, but you're not really paying much attention to much more of it. And that's kind of, so I really didn't hate it, even though this is not the kind of story I want. It felt like a big, grandiose kind of pompous, like, here's my da-da-da, and like, I'm gonna be like this holding court guy, and I got that vibe off of it. But I think we access this story very differently, and that's cool.
Yeah, I agree with you that I came at it very differently. I am the audience for this sort of thing. I am
Well, I'm glad you were here.
Whereas, originally I thought this was going to be about, like alternate universe where the Ottoman Empire keeps pushing through, Eastern Europe, but that clearly isn't what's going on here. So in any case, I was very interested conceptually in what could have been done, but I think you're right that in terms of actually telling the story, it's, who is telling this? You read it in the way that you read it. I read it more as in, some subjugated person, reflecting in his tattered rags saying, oh, remember when this happened? So
Yeah.
I think that the event itself that our narrator is describing were interesting to me, but it did lack that sort of aspect to it. So overall, I liked it. I think it was done, but again, I come away from it waiting for more.
Fair enough. Cool. Next one. We've got Court Funded Poster, who is a newbie to the Thunderdome. So welcome. If you're listening to this, we're so happy to have you. And their story is a small indulgence. All right. So we have, okay, what do we call this? A Chekhov's item? Like, there's a thing that's, here's this item, and it's very coyly handled as to what it is. Now, here's the deal. If you're going to do that, know that everyone who reads this, at least I think, gets it into their head of what might this thing be. And I have, in reading this, I'm thinking, okay, it's got to be like a sex thing or like a racist thing or something that is like not, and like to some extent, sure, it might be a part of that second one, but like, I had in my mind, I mean, I've seen like, Burn After Reading and like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and these things where like there's this mysterious item and that ends up being like a dildo bike or just something crazy. And I'm ready for this to be fucking nuts. And it's a fucking hat. Like, and look, I don't want to get hung up on that, but it was such a letdown. We got, and the story meandered through this urban sprawling environment about some way of handling homeless people and empathy, and then halfway through the story it does that thing where it's like, but never mind all that, the story is actually about this. Like, well, then why did you waste all of your words on it? Okay, having said all that, it did feel like a story that was being told. It may have handled the prompt directly very well, But I wasn't here. I wasn't here for a lot of it. The build up to like a conical hat, and then it being kind of like I appreciated the whole, oh my god, I'm gonna take it and like throw the money at you. Like that felt awkward and very like, real. I didn't understand what the story's purpose was. And like, who are they telling this story to is kind of another question. Was it like a grandkid or something? I don't know. So it didn't quite land for me, but there is promise here. Like clearly there's a good command of voice. The prose is pretty clean. So there's that.
Yeah, I disagree with you a little bit on this one.
Good.
I quite enjoyed the description of the city. I think that was very much how, in the vein of how I relate to places when I think about it. So I think that was captured very well. In particular, I also really like the image of the hat hanging like the halo in the church. I don't necessarily know what you were going for with that one, but I think it's a very nice image. So it could be, again, me having a shallow read of this. But yeah, I think that there were a lot of things done right in this story. I don't think that your objections are particularly wrong. I like the language of telling. I like the way that it's conducted. I did feel a bit of a letdown at the end. What I assumed is that it was meant as a gift, and that it was that taking payment from it would be, somehow perceived as demeaning, or
Well, that's a kinder read. I thought it was like, oh my god, this person's gonna kill me if I don't give them my hat. Like I kind of sided
Okay.
with like that weird view, but who knows? I mean,
See, yes,
either interpretation.
I thought it was our narrator's misinterpretation that was the point here. That
Maybe.
because they had perceived it that way. I could be off base, but the way I read it, unless I'm mistaken, is that the possessor of the hat picked it up and put it on our narrator here. But in any case, there was a lot I think to like about this. I don't think it necessarily all came together very well, like you said. But there are things that I will remember about this.
Yeah, and to clarify, I actually did indeed enjoy the bit about the city too. It just felt like the writer kind of took a dump on us when they dismissed it as like not what I want to be talking about. Like I was with you. Like honestly, if the story stayed in the city, I think I preferred the prose and the musing there more so than the country. Like that was kind of where that turn itself of like, but this isn't what this is about. It's about this, like began to upset me. And then when we get out into like the rural, farming area, I wasn't as interested, and I thought it lacked a certain vibrancy. I liked the feel of the city segment a little better myself as well.
I think that transition could have been maintained better if there was a more explicit contrast. Or if there was some sort of undercurrent of searching for the hat at their time, which again, it was chosen to be revealed later on. So that's is what it is. But I think this story could have been reworked to be a little bit stronger, but I don't think it's by any means a poor story.
No, again, there's stuff in here that is certainly, worth liking. And especially, I have no idea what Court Funded's posters history is with writing. For all we know, they're a published author and this is their first, try with this. But if you are a relatively new author, you are starting off with far more promise than I did. And if this is the bottom of what you're able to do, please stick around, because you've got something and you know what you're doing as far as like putting together some kind of a narrative. So it's encouraging to see.
Yeah, in terms of authorship in general, I can't get this out of my head. I watched In the Mouth of Madness this past weekend. You ever seen that one? It's a John Carpenter film where Sam Neill plays this insurance agent.
How have I not seen this? Those are two really good names.
Investigate the disappearance of a Stephen King alike. And then, it gets into sort of a Lovecraftian theme there. But it has to do a lot with authorship. And I had that in the back of my mind in terms of telling stories. So that did color some of my interpretations for, like what one can do. Doesn't really have a whole lot of context here, but if you haven't seen the movie, you should definitely check it out.
That's cool.
So what do we have after Small Indulgence?
We are on to Carl Killer Miller.
Yes,
and I believe you are up with One Last Good Thing.
One Last Good Thing. I thought this was a good thing. I quite like this one. I thought it was a lovely story. I really like the framing of the grandfather telling the kids the story, in one sense, in one framing, while recalling it to himself for our benefit, as what actually happened. I think the dialogue here hits. I said earlier that I don't really like messing around with sort of accents, but I think word choice here was just enough on the line to, add something to it rather than detract from it. So maybe I'm just persnickety in unreasonable ways, but I liked it. I could really envision it. I did think at times that it got a bit staccato for me. I think I would have liked a little bit more of a deliberate pace at certain points, but that's the nature of having a dialogue heavy story. But on the whole, I really liked it. I came away from this enjoying it.
I kind of struggle with this one. So I think, and I think I'm now correct on this. It took me a while to figure out what the structure of this was, but I think I'm going to go with a more broad one. I'm assuming you've seen The Princess Bride.
Yeah.
That's what this felt like, right? We have the story cut away to like a omniscient version of the story with occasional interruptions from the audience of like what the story is. That's kind of what this felt like, I think. Does that sound right? Because I'm still not entirely sure if I read this correctly.
Yes, but my interpretation was that the flashback is what actually occurred, but that
right.
Our narrator was telling the kids a metaphorical version of it.
Okay. So yeah, this is again like, and this isn't like me trying to be like self-effacing. I genuinely don't have great reading comprehension. I had a bitch of a time keeping up with it. I got lost from beat to beat as far as like what is happening, who are these people, and this is the kind of story where I just again like kind of can't really piece things together. I don't know. I again kind of just I struggled to follow the continuity. The omniscient perspective of the story within the story, because there is sort of a comment on how other people are feeling, felt jarring to me because it didn't feel like it was a straight recollection. It felt like it was like, I'm going to show you my home movie that someone else shot of this thing as opposed to telling of it. So I struggle with it. I didn't hate reading it, but I couldn't really follow it. And that's kind of been a theme for me for a couple of the stories this week. So that's just where I'm coming from.
Yeah, it's also quite possible that I completely misinterpreted it. But in the way that I interpreted it as him sort of, how do I talk about this sacrifice that my brother made for me? How do I talk about missing him in a way that they can appreciate it and not be overwhelmed by it? I liked that. So if that's what you were going for, excellent. If that's not what you were going for, well, it came across that way to me, so I'm sorry.
I happen to really like that idea too, and I'm interested in rereading this story with that kind of understanding. I essentially, I think what I needed at the beginning was for someone to say, hey, here's what this story is, and then I would have been able to grasp it better, but I had far too much of a hard time figuring out how it was working and like what the game was here. So
I think it was structurally a little jumbled in that sense, so I can completely understand that. I think that, like I said, what I read as staccato could have added to that effect as well. So.
All right, so we got two left. I think, did you just take that one first? I think you did, right?
I did.
Okay. I don't know how to pronounce this name. Telltale? Telltale? I don't.
Let me see here. Let me give it my best guess.
Taleedle? I don't know. If you want to let me know on Discord if you're there, go ahead, because I would like to get it right next time. I apologize if I'm getting it wrong.
T. Okay, let's start off with T.
T. Okay, so T story I remember. I mean, this didn't feel like a great effort. This felt just like a bunch of things that a person would say. I get the impression that this story is being told at a grave. I guess that's in my head what's going on here, with the person kind of recounting all of this. I kind of need that benefit for my own edification of like how I picture this story happening. But if not that, it's just a bunch of kind of and then musings that, yeah, I kind of see that they connect a little bit. The ending kind of feels like it's supposed to be some heavy hit, and it didn't really hit for me. In a story that's this short, having, what, maybe 10% of the words be I remember was challenging. I would be a little bit more inclined to be favorable too if there also like weren't proofing errors, which essentially made this feel like it was just very rushed. I wasn't about it. That's kind of where I'm at.
I thought it was short and sweet. I don't disagree with your criticisms. I think that it did seem a little rushed, and it seemed a little, it seemed a little less fleshed out than it could be, even in its sort of limited scope. I liked the dynamic between, the child remembering this for the father. I liked the turn at the end. I thought it was something that I could see myself thinking or reminiscing about my father if I was in the position. It felt very real to me, but I think that, again, what you alluded to correctly dragged it down a little bit. So while I think that the spirit was really there, the execution could have been tweaked, certainly.
Yeah, I think the form kind of clouded the function for me. If this story was going to hit, it needed to be kind of structured in a way that actually, could work as something that flowed a little bit more than, you use the word staccato. It's not quite what this is. It's something else. I don't know. It definitely was hard for me to retain interest from each, from each mash of the return key as we sort of go from thing to thing to thing. So that's kind of where I'm at with I Remember. An apt title.
There was almost sort of a biblical quality to it to me that I really enjoyed. I don't know if that was the intention or not, but sort of the imagery of sailing to England and bringing the ashes, the only way that you arrive there. It sort of reminded me of Moses dying in the desert, and not living to go into Canaan, if I remember that correctly. Which
You got it.
Yeah, okay. I want to make sure I'm on base there. I did have a religious education, but
and I had a Jewish one, so I'll seal it in. Yeah.
So there's something there that seems timeless in this telling that I think was right on the fringes, but again, I don't know that you got there for me. So overall, again, I think you captured the spirit very well, but didn't give it the best presentation.
Yeah, no, now that I'm thinking about it, what this kind of looks like, another story we commented on felt like it needed more effort. I feel like this needed just some more time. If this was written and you had a couple nights to sleep on it, like this almost feels like an outline of something that could be good.
Yes.
Right. Like just like some of these bits need to be fleshed out. Some need to be discarded in favor of others. And then we might actually have something that feels really strong. So just some time to sort of gestate and think more. And I think this could be something that I could grow to appreciate a little more than I did.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair perspective on it.
Cool. So, all right, well, we got one left.
The last one that we'll be talking about was Seb Mojo's Settlement Day, which is I think the briefest of our stories this week, and it definitely hits what I'm looking for with Kelly and Alistair recalling. Well, a memory that only Alistair recalls specifically, but sort of in the perspective of looking back on their house before they leave it, assuming that I interpreted it correctly. And I thought for what it was, it definitely hit on the points that I was looking for. It felt very real to me, again, which is something that I thought was a real quality in these stories. I can't say that I was particularly enthralled by the tale. But again, it felt like a sort of slice of life that I could see and that I could relate to and that I could see myself living. So I think that was very well accomplished.
And I think we're probably most aligned on this story because I kind of feel exactly that way. Like this really, it felt very genuine and authentic. I could see this all playing out as an oral story. I didn't care. Like I don't know. It was like, it didn't evoke much out of me. And considering how authentic it did read, that definitely felt like I wanted more. And like, why did this need to be that short? Like I wanted more here. It didn't need to be that short. And probably is that short? Maybe because the author ran out of time, knowing their tendencies. So I wanted more. I didn't quite get more. But what is here? Certainly a good, a good start to, obviously again, it reads really, really well and does hit that kind of, recounting just of things that have happened. And
yeah, that's exactly it. It's frustrating because I feel like with such a command of what I was hoping to see here, I wish it could have been longer. I wish it could have been a little bit more.
No, it does as good of a job as any as far as like that framework.
So, overall, very good. A little bit limited just in the fact that it's 400 words, but I think pound for pound, it's quite good.
Cool. All right, so we're doing judgment.
Yeah, I think we should. How do
Can
you
work
want
this
to
out.
run? I'll defer to your experience.
I'll defer to your leadership. But we, so let's,
I lead by following.
do we want to start with what we liked? I mean, this doesn't feel like a week that's going to be littered with a bunch of DMs. I think everything at least tried, maybe one or two if we're going to even go that far, but I don't know if we really need to do that much based on how we both seem to sound about it.
Well, I don't really like the concept of giving DMs.
I don't either. I'm not.
Are we obligated to give a loser? I assume that
Never.
the function is that you're obligated to have a
So
loser.
yeah, I mean, it gets into such a thing. I personally don't like the idea of a loss. I don't like the idea of a loser tar. I don't like the idea of DMs. I don't think that's the common perception. You're the boss though. It's
Well,
up to you.
You know, I don't know if I'm obligated. And if I'm not obligated, I won't give a loser because I don't think any of these were poor.
You are not obligated. You are not obligated.
I'm not going to pick one. I'm not going to pick
Good.
loss.
Okay. No losses.
I'm not going to pick a DM either.
Fair enough.
I think it was very clear which ones we thought were lower on the totem, as it were, and why, and how they could have been improved. But I don't think any of them were poor, really.
No, I really don't either. Like I had issues with some, but again, like nothing. Like a loss shows up for me when like I get angry. I didn't really get angry this week. I didn't feel the need to slap a story or anything. Like the one, no. Yeah, I don't. We don't need one. And you are indeed the boss, so I'm good with it.
So if you think you dodged a bullet on a loss, it's just because of what you didn't bring to the table but could have brought to the table, because there was nothing here that was poor. It was just stuff that wasn't fleshed out fully or taken enough time, as far as I'm concerned.
Fair enough. Cool.
Now that I've pounded my fist against the table, I think we'll disagree on what we want to give the winner to. So if you want to convince me as to yours,
yeah, so
in that regard,
generally speaking, especially when I'm a co-judge, if there's a story I feel really strongly about, and clearly the one I feel the most strongly about is Eurechis this week, my ask is that it HMs. If it does that, you won't hear a boo out of me. I would certainly not want it to DM or lose, but I don't think I'm too worried about that this week. Yeah. So honestly, at this point, I'm pretty good with let's see.
Can you guess who I thought the winner should be, or who I think at this point?
Is it couples counseling?
No, it is not.
Okay, I'm not entirely sure then.
I enjoyed the most One Last Good Thing.
Okay.
That was the way that I read it. It really spoke to me. However, I would not object to giving it to.
I'm glad that it did. And I really don't object to it winning, because if it did speak to you that strongly, I do want to revisit it. And I'm happy enough with it taking down that distinction if you felt strongly about it. So that works for me.
Here's the thing. I didn't pick a winner or one that I thought deserved the winner. I felt that way talking about it, but I think that it's really only by a hair. So again, given the last time we went through this, I feel like I went by fiat here to pick.
No, we went by our third person who wasn't here. This time we don't have a third person. So I'm going to put you in the uncomfortable position of fiating this a little bit, knowing that you have my blessing. Now, if it is that close, what else was up at the top for you? So we each had our favorites. What else was up there? Because I mean, I think we might jointly like something perhaps a little bit better. So like, I think the other two that kind of stuck out the most to me were couples counseling and maybe Cracked.
Okay.
I like those.
Let's see. I marked a couple of the ones that I liked the best. I liked One Last Good Thing. I liked Lacune. I liked On the Anniversary When Time Ended, or Wow, That Felt Just Like Yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, so I wasn't sure if we were going to be different. I'm pleasantly surprised that our opinions are a little bit more varied this time. And yeah, I think the main thing is like the stories that I really did like, or the story that I love the most, I do want to get some kind of a positive distinction for. But beyond that, I'm not terribly combative about this. I just want to. I know that the dome is clamoring for a verdict. So
yeah, we're certainly taking our time here. I think when we read through and discussed Lacune, if it's not how that's pronounced, it's going to sound foolish, but I think I said it's not necessarily my favorite, but I think it probably was the best written this week, and I think it probably had the strongest impact on me. my favorite was certainly One Last Good Thing, but I don't want to pick just based on my favorite. I want to pick on what I think is the best, and if they're neck and neck for me and Lacune stands out above for you, then I think that's the way to go for a winner.
Okay. If you're good with it, I'm good with it.
Yeah.
And so clearly One Last Good Thing takes an HM as well. It deserved one. Again, even though I felt a little lost, I did enjoy the reading of it, which is
Sure.
a comment I think I had for 3 or 4 stories this week. And then does anything else feel like it deserves that kind of distinction for you?
There were a couple that I quite liked. I don't want to give out HMs to half of the things. I think that
Sure.
there's certainly a quality. I don't know if you had to go to bat for one for HM, what would it be?
I think it was more flawed than the other ones that I would, but I think if one's going to stick with me, it's probably Cracked.
Okay, so
That's
Cracked,
but
gets
it's
one.
not by much, and I could certainly be talked out of that if one or if you want to keep it tight.
No, I think Cracked gets one, and I like a couple others, but they don't stand above each other to the point where I think it needs to be rewarded over the others with that. So I think we can give one to Cracked. I'll give one to One Last Good Thing, and then our winner will be That Good Night.
Certainly good by me if it's good by you.
That's good for me.
Cool.
Like I said, I really enjoyed this week, so thank you guys for writing these. They were a pleasure to read, even when they were horribly depressing, which there was a run of a couple in a row where it's just like, Jesus Christ, life.
It's true.
But
I think I've been calcified against that kind of thing after spending a lot of time in the dome. So
yeah.
If they don't go to global warming, it doesn't usually shred me apart in a way that I'm unhappy about. The stories that go there, I just get depressed for a month and no thank you. But apart from that,
like fucking watching First Reformed on repeat.
yeah, no, so anyhow.
All right, well, it's been a pleasure, Chili. Thank you for
Indeed.
recording. We'll
sure.
get this up, and all of you clamoring with various spellings of prompt in the Discord will hopefully be pleased very soon
Cool.
by a new one, which I'm sure will be a lot of fun. So congratulations to all, and thanks again.
All right, take care.